Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's Miss Allen on behalf of Susan Sinclair next.
Right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jenkins. Can you see me?
Sorry, right.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Christy Allen. I represent core participant Susan Sinclair, who is a wrongfully convicted sub-postmistress and the first to successfully appeal her conviction in Scotland, which only happened in September last year. In the various witness statements that you've provided to the inquiry to date, and in your oral evidence this week, you have described the use of case-specific witness statements in cases such as Seema Misra and Huey Thomas, and you've described the use of generic witness statements in a number of criminal cases thereafter up until December 2013. Am I correct in my understanding that you estimate that you provided witness statements in one form or another for approximately 15 post office prosecutions in total?
I can't remember the number. I thought it was less than that, but I won't argue with the figure. It's that sort of order of magnitude.
So thereabouts, 15 or thereabouts. Yeah. Of these 15 or thereabouts cases, approximately how many times did you attend court to give oral evidence at trial as an expert witness?
I only gave oral evidence in one case.
And of that one attendance at court, how many times or on that one occasion was your independence called into question given your employment with Fujitsu, which was commercially contracted by Post Office?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Sorry.
On the one attendance, I'll repeat the question. On the one attendance that you did appear at court, am I right in thinking that your independence was called into question at trial given your employment with Fujitsu, which was commercially contracted, of course, by Post Office?
I'm not sure that it was... I was just asked, was I biased because I worked for Fujitsu, or was that effect?
So how was the issue of your independence overcome at trial?
I'm not quite clear. I was just asked, what was the fact that I worked for Fujitsu relevant by the judge, and I said I didn't think it was, and that was the end of it, as far as I'm aware.
And that's, I think, the point where you were called the Fujitsu man at trial.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Thank you. Given that the core participant that I represent was prosecuted in accordance with the criminal justice system in Scotland, I want to now turn to focus on the position in Scotland. Firstly, what was your understanding of the legal procedure for Post Office prosecutions in Scotland and the involvement, therefore, of the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service?
At the time, I had no knowledge. I do understand that the Scottish legal system is different from the English one, but that's the level of my knowledge, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. And is it right to assume that you never provided oral evidence in a Scottish criminal prosecution?
Correct.
What was the extent of your involvement in providing evidence in Scottish cases as to the functionality or integrity of Horizon, if any?
I don't believe I was involved in any Scottish cases, but I can't be 100% sure of that.
And on that basis, as far as you're aware, was your generic witness statement and or your Horizon integrity reports relied upon in such cases?
Not that I'm aware of.
And just finally on this topic, to the best of your knowledge, was anyone else from Fujitsu, or indeed Post Office, involved in providing evidence in Scottish cases?
I don't know, is the simple answer.
Thank you. If we could just move on to another topic. At paragraph 10 of your fourth witness statement, you refer to Post Office's instruction of second sight in 2012 as a good thing, and state that you believed that an independent review would conclude that Horizon was sound, but that it might also provide recommendations for improvements, which you would welcome. You also note that you understood the need for an independent review of Horizon given the criticism of it in the media. Were you concerned by the growing criticisms of Horizon in the media?
I wasn't concerned about it. I just wanted... I felt it was a sound system, and I was welcomed the opportunity to actually show that it was.
And so therefore, did you consider the impact of these concerns and public criticisms of Horizon as having any bearing on the witness evidence that you provided in criminal cases, whether in the past or indeed going forward, considering you carried on your role in prosecution support until 2013?
I think the last case I was involved in was about the same sort of, I think it was the case of Mr. Ishak that we talked about this morning, was the time that I first became involved with Second Sight. So that they seem to coincide, I think.
And would you consider that the impact of these emerging public concerns and criticism of Horizon had any impact in the way that you conducted your evidence at that point?
No, I just continued to explain what I thought I knew about the system. Yeah.
Thank you. If we move on at paragraph 28 of your fourth witness statement, you state that you recall suggesting that Post Office should provide information to Second Sight about the receipts and payments mismatch bug and the suspense account bug. Given that we're talking about Second Sight, I assume that you made this suggestion around the time of Second Sight's instruction in 2012.
Yes, I believe so. I can't remember exactly what. I think it was probably 2013 by then rather than 2012, but yes.
Well, by this time, was the existence of these bugs accepted as being within the common knowledge of Fujitsu and Post Office, if not the defence teams and the accused?
Yes, I believe so. I wasn't aware that there was any secret about them between Fujitsu and Post Office.
So why did you feel the need, therefore, to make this point to Post Office, if Post Office already knew about such issues and that these were indeed within the common knowledge?
I thought they were. I thought it was a good example of how we were able to identify a problem, diagnose the problem, and fix the problem, and work out its full extent.
So that would be beneficial for Second Sight's instruction?
Yes.
Why, when you've maintained throughout your evidence to the inquiry this week that past problems and bugs in Horizon were not relevant for inclusion in your case-specific and generic witness statements, nor did you deem them relevant for the purposes of your Horizon integrity reports, did you now, in 2012 to 2013, consider these issues relevant to disclose for the purposes of Second Sight?
Because I saw this as being a much broader issue, and again, I was seeing that as a good example of how we were able to diagnose and identify and fix problems.
And it's a broader issues as opposed to the disclosure in criminal cases?
Yes.
Thank you. I have just one final question for you. In your evidence to the inquiry this week, you were asked by Mr. Beer why, when you were not the lead engineer for the Post Office account, nor were you the only one involved in the maintenance and development of Horizon, that Post Office relied on you specifically to provide evidence relating to the integrity of Horizon in criminal prosecutions. I note your answer was that you had a fairly good overview knowledge of Horizon due to your role in the agent team, your work in middle account, back end and impact, so you had a detailed knowledge of how Counter operated and a good overview knowledge of how Horizon worked, but that you were not the only person who could be used as an expert. You stated that despite some email correspondence where other names within Fujitsu were suggested for one reason or another, it was you that in the end that was picked to support Post Office in this way. Indeed, you confirmed when asked by Dave Jennings in 2009 whether there was anyone else that could cover this activity as well or as instead of you, and your answer was should, then probably yes, could, then probably no. Do you therefore consider that you had a monopoly in terms of the availability of alternative experts who were able to speak to the integrity of Horizon, which effectively contributed significantly, perhaps, to what's been suggested as the Post Office's over-reliance on your services in the criminal prosecutions of sub-postmasters, and indeed again in the group litigation, notwithstanding the criticisms of you some years, 5 years previously?
No, I disagree with that. There was an example, for example, at the beginning of February when I was getting fairly heavily involved with the case of Mrs. Misra. I was off sick for a few days, and there was a question about, well, if I'm off sick, who could take my place? And there was an email discussion about suggesting some alternative names to get involved instead of me.
And out of interest, who were those alternative names?
I think the name that was mentioned was someone called Dave Johns.
And to the best of your knowledge, did he then get involved in providing witness statements in the
No,
scene?
he didn't, because I came back from my sick leave soon after that. I was only off for about 2 or 3 days, as it turned out, but people didn't know that at the time.
But you would disagree that you maybe had the monopoly in terms of experts available to speak to
Yes.
these issues?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jenkins. That's the end of my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. So, Mr. Beard, do I take it that those are the questions on behalf of core participants, other than any questions to come from Mr. Jenkins' own representative?
That's right, sir.
So, Ms. Dobbin, do you want to ask any questions?
I do, sir, if I may.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins, as you know, I represent you in these proceedings. I'm going to stand up because you're quite far away from me, and it's easier for me to see you if I do.
Okay.
All right? I hope you can hear me as well.
Yes.
I'll bring this a little bit closer. All right. Mr. Jenkins, when I ask you these questions, I'm going to ask you that you try and answer as best you can, unclouded by everything that you know now. Okay?
Okay.
Ask you to do your best with that. Yes?
So what you're saying is in terms of what I knew at the time as opposed to what I know now? Yes, okay.
Exactly, Mr. Jenkins. And the first thing that I wanted to go back and ask you about was the email that you were sent in 2006 in the Castleton case on the 6th of June 2006. Do you recollect that?
Is this the one in preparation for the meeting the following day?
Yes, it is. Exactly. So this is the one where it appears that you were sent the quite technical document, the Part 18 reply, that set out various things that Mr. Castleton was particularising in his case, yes?
Yes, I remember the email you're talking about.
And you know that it also appears that you were sent the letter as well from November 2005, yes?
I now understand that, yes.
All right. Now, before I go back to that, I just want to go to your statement, if I may, and this is your third statement at paragraph 249, and I'm going to ask that that be brought up. That's WITN 00460 300. And if we could just go over the page, thank you. So can you see that, Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
And I think you set out at paragraph 249, and perhaps it's easier if I read it, that until I saw the documents provided to me by the inquiry, I had virtually no memory of being involved in the civil proceedings between Paul and Mr. Lee Castleton. Yes?
Yes.
Bar perhaps 1 or 2 conversations. And if we go over the page, it sets out that the inquiry has referred me to 27 documents to assist my recall of it, but nonetheless I have little memory of my involvement. I'm reliant upon these documents to help me reconstruct what happened. My lawyers have alerted me to a number of additional documents on the inquiry's database to which I refer below. Having read all of this material, I believe that my actual involvement in the case was fairly limited. I neither signed a witness statement nor gave evidence in court. Yes?
Yes, I agree.
And is that right, Mr. Jenkins, that you don't really have very much memory of the involvement that you had in that case?
Correct.
And that you've been dependent on the documents to try and help you reconstruct, as you say, what happened?
Yes, indeed.
All right. And if we go just dropping down, please, to paragraph 252. And this is just to pick up the thread and orientate you. You set out, and if we see the second line, that you were invited to attend a meeting with Poll solicitors on the 6th of June. My lawyers have shown me an email from Brian Pinder dated the 5th of June 2006. The email attached an agenda for the next day's meeting, and I think that's what we now know to be the letter, yes?
Yes, indeed.
And a scanned extract from a document which recorded the issues that Mr. Castleton had experienced, yes?
Yes.
And you had said out there, I probably read both attachments in advance, although I don't recall doing so. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So have you any memory, for example, of reading the Part 18 reply or the sort of technical document that was sent to you with that email?
No, I say I have a vague memory of going to a meeting, but that's about it. And clearly having read the notes of the meeting, then I clearly at that meeting answered some technical questions, and that other document attached there seemed to have similar technical questions, so that's all I'm basing my memory on.
All right. Now, on the morning that you started to give evidence, so before we knew the correct position about what had been sent with the email, Mr. Beer asked you questions about what you would have done when if you'd received this letter in 2006, yes?
Yes.
You recollect that. And you said, and if anyone wants the reference, it's the transcript for the 26th of June, internal page 73, line 5. And you said that you would have skimmed through it, is that right?
Yes.
All right. Now, I wonder then if we could just turn to this document, the email that you were sent ahead of the meeting, and that's FUJ 00152601. Thank you. And I think we've looked at this, Mr. Jenkins. Again, it's just to help you orientate yourself in time. And we see there, please be advised of the email regarding the meeting tomorrow and attachments. Yes?
Yes.
So we've seen that. And that's the email that directs you towards the scanned document, is that right?
Yes.
And if we just look very quickly at this scanned document, please, that's FUJ 00152602. And if we just scroll through that document, please. Thank you. If we could just keep scrolling through. And keep scrolling through. So I think it carries on, Mr. Jenkins, to about page 8, yes?
That seems to be it, yes.
Yes. So I think it's 8 pages of quite perhaps dense sort of technical information or query set out, is that right?
Yes.
All right. And is that the document, is that the information that you would have been interested in order to prepare for the meeting the next day?
I think so, as best as I can work out from what I've seen of what happened at the time.
And did you understand that that's why you were being invited to the meeting, to help contribute in relation to that information?
That is, yes, I think so, from seeing what is said in the covering email and so on, yes.
Exactly. All right, now, I'm showing you these documents to see if I can just put you again, just back in time, Mr. Jenkins, but at the point that you were sent these, had anyone actually mentioned to you that you might be any sort of witness in this case?
I don't believe so, but I can't be 100% sure.
There are no emails to that effect, are there?
Not that I've seen.
Had anyone suggested to you that the meeting was to consider whether anyone might be a witness in this case?
Again, I have no recollection of that.
And that's not reflected in the email that you were sent either, is it?
No.
And we've seen an attendance note of the meeting, haven't we?
Yes.
And you've been through that attendance note, I think, haven't you, for preparing for
Yes,
the
I have.
inquiry? And there's no suggestion in that attendance note, is there, that there was discussion about anyone being a witness in that case?
I can't remember that.
All right, well, perhaps you'll take it from me.
I'm happy
because
to take
no-
it from you, yes.
All right. And in fact, if we look at poll 0007 1138, this is an email from Mr. Dilly, the solicitor, and that was sent on the 27th of June 2006. And
Yes.
if we just scroll down a bit to the witnesses of fact, we see your name there, don't we?
Yes, that's me.
And then if we just look at the next line, it says we will also have 1 or 2 expert witnesses on the IT and accountancy side, correct? Thank you. And it's right, isn't it? When Mr. Dilly came to draft a witness statement for you, Mr. Jenkins, it was a witness statement of fact, wasn't it?
I believe so. As I say, at the time I had no concept of the difference.
All right, well, let's have a quick look. FUJ 001 22284. And perhaps if we could just go to the last paragraph in that witness statement. Okay, we've seen this first part of it, Mr. Jenkins. You can see it says witness statement. And if we go to the last paragraph, please. Paragraph 38, that was drafted for you by Mr. Dilly, wasn't it?
Yes. Well, I assume so, at least.
I think we know from the emails, Mr. Jenkins, that it was, and that's not in
sure.
dispute.
Yeah.
And he sets out there what it was that he wanted, or he was proposing that you say, yes?
Yes.
And he sets out, I'm not going to go through all of it, there are no grounds for believing that the problems Mr. Castleton says he experienced with his computer would have caused either theoretical or real losses, correct?
Yes.
And we can see what you say underneath that. Not sure I can agree to this without looking more closely at what has gone on, correct?
Yes. That's
And
my
then
comment.
sorry, Mr. Jenkins, I didn't mean to talk across you. And we can see that it was proposed that you sign that as a witness of fact, correct?
Yes.
Just says, I believe the facts in this statement are true. Yes?
Yes.
You can see that. Thank you. That can be taken down. When you were taken to the letter about expert duties, the one from November 2005, Mr. Beer put this to you. If we scan through the letter just slowly, I think you will have read it carefully overnight. The letter doesn't refer, would you accept, to the provider of a report from Fujitsu as being an expert witness. Yes?
Yes.
And Mr. Beer then took you through the letter, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And in fact, you agreed with him that that's what the letter said. Yes?
Yes.
And in fact, I think we see, if we go to the letter, that it refers to that twice. I'm going to ask if we go to it. FUJ 00 152573. And I'm going to go to the second place where it mentions it. But if we go, please, to the final page of it, page 3. Sorry, it's page 14 of the document. if you could just scroll down, please. And if perhaps we could just pause there. So, for example, it says at paragraph 7, doesn't it, Mr. Jenkins? If we look at the paragraph there, that the report should contain a declaration that it's been prepared in accordance with the Code of Guidance on Expert Evidence, yes?
Yes.
And if we continue scrolling, please, to 5, paragraph 5. This is so immediately under duty to the post office. Sets out in performing all of your duties for which the client will pay, you will owe a duty to the client to act with professional standards of skill, care and diligence adhered to by an experienced and competent consultants acting as expert witnesses, correct?
Yes, I see that.
All right. Now, that shows you, doesn't it, Mr. Jenkins, that 2 people can read a document like this, or perhaps skim over it and miss important points, yes?
Yes.
Even someone as forensic as Mr. Bear can miss that, yes?
Yes.
Or not understand it, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Just going to ask if that be taken down, please. Now, the inquiry saw when it was decided that you wouldn't be a witness in that case. Mr. Pinder emailed you on the 4th of September, didn't he?
Yes, I believe there was an email around that sort of time.
All right, and if we look at FUJ 00154733. We didn't come back to this again yesterday, Mr. Jenkins, when this was revisited. But if we just look at what it says again. So Mr. Pinder is telling you why you're not going to be a witness. Yes? He states that although you'd probably be a good witness, it's for evidential reasons. Yes?
Yes, I see that.
And then you said the fine, I won't even try and understand what this means, yes? Now, I know this was about 18 years ago, Mr. Jenkins, but again, reading that email now, does it assist you as to whether, had you read the November 2005 letter, you had digested its contents or understood it in any way?
I don't think so, because as I say there, I won't try and understand what that means, talking about opinion evidence and expert evidence, and it didn't really have any meaning for me then.
All right. Now, you've been asked about what guidance you sought about being a witness, haven't you?
Yes.
In the course of the past few days. And I wanted to ask you about one of the occasions proximate to this when you did ask for guidance, yes?
Okay.
And if we could go, please, to FUJ 0001 52616. And if we could scroll down, please. And scroll down again, please. And keep scrolling down. Okay, and if we could just stop there. So this was an email that you were sending to Miss Matthews, is that right?
Yes, it looks like that, yes.
So one of the post office investigators, correct?
Yes, as I understand it.
And if we just look there, you can see that this is an email about arrangements, yes?
Yes.
and you say to her, do you have any idea as to how much time will be involved in exactly what's required? I've never been to court in any capacity, and my knowledge of such things is based on films and TV, which I'm sure are inaccurate.
Yes.
And if we just scroll up, please. And she answers you. And we can see this is on the 12th of July, isn't it?
Yes.
And we see a couple of paragraphs down. All witnesses have to be present on the first day of trial unless the defence has agreed their statement and don't wish to ask any questions about that evidence. It's pretty much as you see on the TV, really. But remember, you'll have sight of your statement prior to taking the stand and can only be asked questions specifically about your statement. Yes?
Yes, I see that.
Was that pretty much the height of the sort of guidance that you were given about being a witness when you sought that guidance?
Yes, I think so.
Now, that was in July 2006, yes?
Yes.
So that was a few months after the conference that had taken place in June 2006, wasn't it?
Yes, the following month, yes.
And again, does that throw any light, Mr. Jenkins, on what you understood about giving evidence in court, do you think?
Well, it shows that I didn't have much idea about what was involved.
Right. I'm going to move on, if I may, in time, Mr. Jenkins, to 2010 and to Mrs. Misra's case.
Okay.
Now, some expert reports have been put to you, yes?
Yes.
And you've been asked the question, why didn't they trigger you to think, does this all apply to me? Am I subject to these sorts of duties? Yes?
Yes, I've certainly been asked that.
I wanted to ask you this. In the years that you provided support to Post Office in its prosecutions, did those type of reports ever trigger any lawyer to send to you formal instructions as an expert in any case?
I don't believe so.
Did those sorts of reports trigger any lawyer to tell you that the evidence that you were giving was opinion evidence and that you were therefore subject to those sorts of duties?
Not that I can recall.
Did they ever trigger any lawyer to tell you that your response should be in the form of an expert report?
No, I believe the only things I ever produced were witness statements.
Did they ever trigger any lawyer to sit down with you and actually explain what expert duties are and what they mean?
Not that I can recall.
Did they ever trigger any lawyer to explain to you or to say to you that you were in the same sort of category as these experts?
Not that I can recall.
Did they ever trigger any lawyer to say to you that your statements ought to bear an expert declaration?
No, I don't believe they ever did.
Did any of that ever happen, Mr. Jenkins?
I don't believe so.
In the case of Mr. Ishak, Mr. Jenkins, I think it's right, isn't it, that you went to trial on the first day without having been provided with Miss Ibbetson's expert report. Is that right?
That's my understanding of things from looking at the email documentation, and I do recall meeting with her on the first day of the trial in Bradford.
It was an accountancy report, wasn't it?
I believe so, yes.
You had to ask Miss Ibbetson for all of the appendices to her report because you didn't have them. That's right, isn't it?
I believe so. I got emailed the report, and I think later I had to ask her for the appendices so that I could try and do some sort of analysis to try and correlate her figures against the ARQ data that I'd happened to have with me because I'd asked for it.
All right. The email that sent you her report was in fact a blank email, wasn't it?
Yes, I believe it was.
And did you have to work into the night on the first day of trial in order to be able to respond to her report?
Yes, I think it was about 9-10 o'clock in the evening when I've sent my response to her report to her.
And did you have to, as I understand it, do a reconciliation exercise
Yes.
overnight in order to be able to, as it were, agree with her report? Is that what you had to do with the material that you'd been provided with?
Yes, I had to go through the ARQ. I can't remember all the details now, but I didn't start looking at the ARQ data until I got that, and I'd spent quite a bit of time, both in the afternoon and in the evening, going through the ARQ data to try and agree the figures that she had in her report and try and work out where she'd got her figures from.
And did it occur to you, Mr. Jenkins, to object or to say that that wasn't a very fair way of treating you, to expect you to come along to a trial on the first day and to do all of that and to be expected to get on top of her report?
I just thought I'd try and get on with it and do the best that I could with limited information that I had.
We've seen, and Mr. Maloney asked you about this, that you were also sent a defence case statement in Mr. Ishak's case, yes?
Yeah, that was sort of a week or two before that, I believe.
And the fact that a lawyer sent you a witness in a case, the defence case statement, did that make you think that that was all right, that that was the sort of thing that a lawyer could do?
Yes, I'd been sent defence case statements before, so I thought it was the normal thing to do.
And did you think that it was all right to comment on disclosure requests that were being made to Post Office?
It didn't occur to me to question it.
Did you have any responsibility for Post Office's disclosure obligations?
I didn't think I had.
And did anyone properly explain to you the sorts of duties that Post Office owed as a prosecutor?
No, I didn't understand what disclosure meant and what responsibilities anybody had to do with it.
All right. I'm going to move on then, if I may, Mr. Jenkins, to ask you about the boilerplate paragraphs that appear in Penny Thomas's witness
Yeah.
statement. Yes?
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to start then, if I could, exactly as Mr. Steen did, with your statement at paragraph 102, and that's your third witness statement. Okay, and do you have that?
Did you say page or paragraph 102, Ms. Robin? Sorry.
Sorry, sir, it's paragraph 102.
Yeah.
I apologise if I said that, page 33. Okay, Mr. Jenkins, do you see that?
I see that in front of me now,
Right.
yes.
And I'm just going to ask you, I'm not going to read all of this out, I'm just going to ask you to look at paragraph 102, and you see the heading above that, yes?
Yes.
And if we just scroll through, and you see at paragraph 103, Mr. Jenkins, you set out there the understanding on the part of some witnesses to the inquiry that those paragraphs in Penny's statement were about how Horizon was working, yes?
Yes.
And if we go on to paragraph 104, I don't think we need worry about that. If we go on, if we scan through to paragraph 105, yes?
Yes.
And you set out there about why you didn't think they could give an opinion on the operation of Horizon, yes?
Yes.
And paragraph 106, you set out that their witness statement was concerned with the production of ARQ data, correct?
Yes.
Now, I wanted to ask you about this, and I want to ask you, I'm going to come on to Mr. Thomas's case as well. But if we look at paragraph 107, you were taken to this. You were explaining that there was no guidance, as it were, as to what the standard paragraphs were supposed to mean, correct?
Correct.
And you set out that you could see from the communications in Mr. Thomas's case that you raised a question about those paragraphs, yes?
Yes.
And I'll come back to that and what the question or the query that you raised. And if you just read through that.
Yes.
You read that unto the end of the paragraph, yes? You set out in Mr. Thomas's case, I think my concern was that I couldn't include these paragraphs because I hadn't extracted the ARQ spreadsheets that my draft statement was referring to. By this, I couldn't speak to the computer which had extracted the spreadsheets as working properly. And I deal with the contemporaneous evidence about this, yes?
Yes.
All right. Just wanted to remind you of the background against which you were asked questions
yes.
about this, all right? So I wonder then if we could go to Penny Thomas's statement, and this is at FUJ 001222139. And if we could go to the final two paragraphs, please. And I think, Mr. Jenkins, you might recognise this. I think Miss Thomas asked you and then I think some other people to look at her witness statement.
Yes.
Is that right? And, sorry, if we could go to the penultimate page, please. So we see, don't we, those two paragraphs at the end of her standard statement, yes?
Yes.
And is that the standard statement by which the ARQ data would be produced?
I believe so.
And I think she's made some notes there. That may not matter. Do you see that?
Yes, I can see that.
And I just wanted to be clear about this, Mr. Jenkins. And if we just, yes, that's fine. In terms of what you understood the first paragraph to relate to and what computer it related to, can you explain that?
I think it's the computer that's actually doing the extraction of the audit data. So I think there's a comment there about an AW, so that'd be the audit workstation.
Where she has said, I hold a responsible
Yes,
position in
yeah.
relation to the audit
Yeah.
workstation.
Yeah.
And I just want to ask you about your understanding of that paragraph and what was meant by it.
It's to do with the computer on which she was actually doing the extraction working properly.
And why did you not think, or what was the basis for your belief that she was not speaking to the Horizon system in that paragraph?
I didn't feel that she understood the way the Horizon system worked at all, so therefore was not qualified to be able to talk about whether the Horizon was working or not. That wasn't her background or expertise.
And if we then go to Mr. Thomas's case, it's right, isn't it, that those paragraphs appeared in a draft of your statement, yes?
Yes.
We've seen that. And perhaps if we just go to that first of all and look at your comment on it. So this is FUJ 001222204. And if we just go to the end of that, please. Oh, sorry, if we just go up, please. All right, we've seen this before, yes?
Yes.
Those were your highlighted paragraphs. Yes?
Yes.
I'm just noting what you say there. I'm not sure that the yellow bit is true. Can this be deleted? All I've done is interpret the data in the spreadsheets that you have emailed to me. Yes?
Yes.
Now I'm going to look then in a bit more detail about what your concern was. But can you just, before we do, explain or what it was that was concerning you to make that comment?
Well, this is saying that I'd actually extracted the data, which I hadn't.
Yes. And do we see if we go to FUJ 00122218? Sorry, 22218. So, and if we scroll down a little bit, and if we just look at that second paragraph, Mr. Jenkins, so ARQ queries, I won't read them all out, requested information in relation to Garwen. I was asked to produce information relating to nil transactions during the period specified. I've provided 3 spreadsheets which I now produce. And then I think this is where you make your comment, isn't it?
Yes. So I'm saying I'm not sure about this. I've had nothing to do with producing those spreadsheets.
All I've done is make some statements based on what is in the spreadsheets. I assume that Nana or Penny produced the spreadsheets, but I've no personal knowledge as to what was included with them or what was excluded. And we've seen this. For all I know, you could have typed them up from scratch.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and maybe it's quite hard to discuss this without having the boilerplate paragraphs in front of us, but perhaps if we go back to FUJ 001222204. Oh, sorry, and to the final 2 paragraphs, please. All right, so having looked at that and your concern is set out in the other, it's a draft, I think, at around the same time, isn't it, Mr. Jenkins? And again, can you just help us, having looked at that, help us understand then, when you were looking at the first part of the first part of the standard statement, again, just to understand what your concern was in relation to the computer and what computer you were referring to.
I wasn't sure about that. My main concern was with the second part, the second paragraph rather than the first.
And that was to do with producing the
data, yes.
All right. And in terms of the first part, the improper use of the computer, did you understand that to refer to the Horizon system?
No, I did not.
And can you just explain why you didn't think that that related to the Horizon system?
Because this was a standard paragraph that I could see had been used by Penny, and I knew that she wasn't in no position to talk about the how Horizon was working or not.
And when it appeared in your witness statement, did you understand it to be concerned with the production of the material that comprised the ARQ data?
Yes. Yes, particularly in relation to the second bit as well, which was talking about generating the ARQ data.
And was that something that you could speak to without having undertaken that process yourself?
Well, no, I couldn't speak about generating the ARQ data because I had no access to it myself.
And were the spreadsheets that you were talking about and discussing in this witness statement, had they come from the ARQ data in the first place?
I can't remember exactly what these spreadsheets were, but they would have come from the ARQ data. I can't remember exactly what extracts they were.
And I think and this is the bit that I wanted to try and understand, Mr. Jenkins, and in fact what you did in order to try and remedy the concern that you had. It appeared from what you were saying yesterday in your evidence that you went to the peak system, is that right?
That's what it said in the final version of the statement, so I assume that must have been what I did, because I can't actually remember what I did at the time. But the fact that my final version of the witness statement talks about having extracted the information from peak, then that must have been what I'd done.
And I think you mentioned yesterday that you obtained the message store from peak, is that right?
That was, yes, exactly how I did that. I can't remember now, but that's what it said in the statement, so that must have been what I did.
And again, just to try and understand, if you got the message store, what is the message store?
The message store is the raw data which is actually put onto the ARQ system from which the ARQ spreadsheets are extracted. So I would have extracted similar sort of spreadsheets from the message store, but using tools of my own rather than the standard tools that Penny and Nina would have used on the ARQ workstation.
And can you just, in terms of why, or was that a more reliable way of obtaining the data than simply relying on the spreadsheets that had been produced for you by someone else?
Thinking about it, it's probably less reliable because the ARQ data in the audit server had a better auditable means of proof that it came from the right place rather than what I did from peak. But I'd not thought that through properly at the time.
Right. But in terms of what it allowed you to do, did it allow you to look at the kind of preserved record?
Yes, it was the same. It was the same underlying data that would have been on the audit server that was there on the peak data. So yes, in terms of extracting the data, it should have been the same data. It's just that, yeah.
So it allowed you, as it were, to undertake that process.
So I could do the extraction process myself, yes.
All right. And at the time, did that meet your concerns about?
Yes, it did, because I'd actually done the extraction of the data myself rather than relying on Nina or Penny doing it on my behalf.
All right. Now, I think we know, after all of this happened, that Miss Matthews then came to take a witness statement from you. Is that right?
So I understand. I have no actual memory of meeting Miss Matthews, but clearly from the various emails around, then that must have happened, yes.
I think we can tell, can't we, that she did come to visit you to take the witness statement from you. All right. And a point that we didn't really touch on in your evidence, but I wanted to ask you, was why it was that you were content to take out of the statement the reference to system failure, yes?
Yes, okay.
Can I just ask you a basic question about that? Was what was being referred to as a zero transaction a failure in the Horizon system?
No, it wasn't.
What was it a failure in?
It was a failure in the end-to-end banking system. So the things that I was referring to as system failures were failures in the communication either between Horizon and the banks or between the banks, because in effect, when doing a banking transaction, what Horizon connected to was Link, which then communicated with a specific bank that was associated with the transaction concerned. So those response codes would have been ones that were generated by the banking system rather than by Horizon itself.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move on, if I may, Mr. Jenkins, then, to a separate issue, and that's the initial question that you were asked in the case of Mrs. Misra, all right?
Okay.
And if we could go, please, to FUJ 00152930 at page 2. All right, we've looked at this. If we could scroll down, please. Okay, so this is the question that we've looked at a few times, Mr. Jenkins. When Gareth completes his statement, could he also mention whether there are any known problems with the Horizon system that Fujitsu are aware of? If none, could this be clarified? Yes?
Yes, I do.
And scrolling up to your reply, or the reply that was sent, you having provided the information. So if we look at 3, that's where you say, this is where I'm reluctant to make a clear statement. I'm aware of one problem where transactions have been lost in particular circumstances due to locking issues. Yes?
Yes.
And that question and your answer to it, it goes to Mr. Jones in Fujitsu, yes?
Yes.
Mr. Singh
Yes.
in Post Office, Mr. Longman, the investigator,
Yes.
and it also went to Mr. Tatford as well, didn't it?
I believe so.
And you having provided that information, Mr. Jenkins, did any of those individuals respond to that information? Did anyone ask you, could you explain more about, for example, the locking problems to which you've referred?
I'm not aware of anyone asking for any clarification on that.
Did anyone ask you if they could speak to you about that in order to understand more about what you were talking about in respect of the lock-in issues?
I don't believe so.
Or did anyone ask if they could speak to you about the process that you undertook to look at the event logs that you were referring to in that response?
I don't believe so.
Did anyone, for example, in Fujitsu say, well, this question is asking what Fujitsu knows, that might require a broader response, that ought not to lie on your shoulders, for example, Mr. Jenkins? Did anyone say anything like that?
I don't believe so.
Did anyone from prosecution support speak to you at that point in order to discuss or explore with you what might be required? Was there any of that sort of conversation?
I don't believe so.
Now, I think it's right, Mr. Jenkins, that you insisted that the data be obtained for Mrs. Misra's branch, yes?
I did.
I think you had to press over a period of about 5 weeks or so, maybe longer.
It was about a month later that the data became available.
Now, I think at some point, this is on the 4th of March, and perhaps we can go to this. This is FUJ 00015 3027. Sorry, 2 zeros, FUJ 0015 3027. Mr. Jenkins, you were sent a number of communications, and I don't have time to go to them all.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go to this one. All right, and if we just scroll down, please. I think this is from Mr. Singh. And we just see set out there, thank you for your email. What's been requested, the transaction logs. I'm not going to read all of this out, Mr. Jenkins, but if you just read it, first paragraph.
Yes.
And then perhaps a bit of the second paragraph, yes?
Yes.
Can I just ask you, having received that further instruction of sort, Mr. Jenkins, what did you understand that your task was, or what you were being asked to do after that?
To respond to the reports that Professor Mclan had produced and to make my comment on his theories. Now that actually talks to rebutting or answering them. My approach was to just respond to them with what I thought how they reflected on the Horizon Systems operation.
And then at paragraph 1, to look at as well errors in the Horizon system for the transaction log period. And what did you understand that?
Looking at the associated NT events associated with the periods for which I had the transaction logs.
All right, I'm just going to try and break that down a bit. So you receive this, yes?
Yes.
And you understand that you've got to look at the report, yes?
Yes.
And that you need to look at the NT events, yes?
Yes.
And what did you need, why were you looking at the NT events?
Primarily to see whether there was anything in there that would reflect that something had been going wrong with the Horizon system in the period for which we had the NT events.
All right. Now, you said yesterday, and this is at page 27, line 19, I thought that what I needed to do was a thorough review of NT events, yes?
Yes.
And I just want to start with a general question. How important are NT events for the purposes of diagnosing the sorts of bugs at a branch that might cause discrepancies?
That tends to be where you would find that there would be a problem.
All right. And did you get the NT events for the whole of the period under indictment?
Yes,
2005 to 2008?
I think I'd received those about a week or two earlier.
All right. So a 4-year period, yes?
I believe so, yes.
All right. And what work was done on the NT events, Mr. Jenkins?
I think initially Anne Chambers had a review through them and passed me an email of what she'd actually found there, which I then had a look at, and I believe I looked at the events myself.
All right. And was that exercise confined to just looking for calendar square events?
It was looking for anything that looked out of the ordinary.
And I think it's been suggested, I should ask you the question, did you find anything out of the ordinary when you did that exercise?
I can't specifically remember that I found anything out of the ordinary, but I'm sure if I had, I would have noted it.
All right. Now, it's been suggested to you that you could have looked, for example, at peaks or perhaps kells for this period as well, in order to look at the ARQ data in relation to that as well, yes?
I believe I did make some inquiries as to what peaks had been raised associated with that branch over that period, but I can't be absolutely certain that I did so, but I believe that it's the sort of thing that I think I would have done.
All right. And in terms of what would you have obtained assistance from looking at other kells, for example? Or other peaks related to the same broad period of time?
I would tended to have looked at peaks rather than kells, and I was relying on the fact that I think we mentioned at some point the concept of having a master peak when there was a problem affecting multiple branches. So therefore I thought that a search of peaks looking for the specific branch would identify if there had been any problems associated with that branch.
Right. And had that check been done?
I believe so, but I can't be absolutely certain.
All right. There's been focus about things that you didn't do in the Misra case. I just wanted to ask you, if I may, about some of the things that you did do, okay? I'm going to set the NT events to one side. So you had the transaction logs, yes?
I did.
And I think that came to about 500,000 transactions, yes?
Something like that, yes.
And I think, is it right, you were looking at that to test it against Professor Mclan's hypothesis?
Yes, I was.
And did you also get the raw message store?
Yes, I did have the raw message store.
And did you do some work on that to look at failed credit card debits as well?
I think I did that from the ARQ data rather than the raw message store.
All right. And what about transaction corrections? Did you look at those as well?
I looked at those again in the ARQ data, and I believe that I also, at some stage, I think it's maybe a month or two later, I was sent a spreadsheet from Mr. Longman of the transaction corrections that have been generated from the back-end PulseApp system, and I did a sort of correlation between the report that he gave me of transaction corrections and those which appeared in the message store.
All right. And did you look at pouch reversals as well?
I did.
And did you also seek to do an analysis of the daily cash movements?
I did.
All right. And was that a type of reconciliation exercise?
It would have been, except for the fact that the daily cash declarations didn't seem to match at all the sort of movements of cash within the day, and therefore it was made it difficult to try and pin down where losses had actually occurred.
All right. Now, just coming back to the calendar square point, you made a statement referring to the fact that you had checked the system events
Yes.
in relation to that in March, on the 9th of March 2010, correct?
I made a statement, yes.
And having mentioned and said that you had undertaken that exercise and looked at the statement, the system events, did anyone say at that point, we need to get a copy of the system events, or can you provide those?
I don't believe so.
And so was it a surprise, or had you expected that Professor Mclan had been provided with those?
I was surprised when it came to the trial that he was asking me for them, because I thought that if he was interested in them, he would have been given them earlier, but which I think is effectively what you're asking.
I understand. All right. So in terms of all of, and also, sorry, I forgot to ask you about this. You did have the peak, and that was also provided to Professor Mclan as well. Is that right?
The calendar square peak.
Sorry, the calendar square peak.
Yes. Again, I don't think I provided it to him until the time of the trial, and again, I was surprised that he hadn't been given that sort of information,
And I
because he'd
think
been asking about it.
You were asked many questions about the peak as well at the trial, weren't you?
I was.
All right, well, we'll come back to that. Just on a similar point, Mr. Jenkins, may I also ask you about this? In terms of the ability of Fujitsu engineers to detect bugs and to be knowledgeable about them, were there systems within Fujitsu intended to pick up whenever, for example, unusual events were generated, or whenever there were bugs that caused discrepancies?
There was a group called SMC, I forget exactly what it stands for, but they were monitoring events from the overall system, both the counters and the data centres, and they're monitoring these 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was the only part of the operation that actually operated on a 24/7 basis.
So was that part of the systems in place then by which Fujitsu knew and understood about bugs in the system?
Yeah.
All right. And in terms of all of the work that you did over the years working on the Horizon systems, are those the sorts of mechanisms that you were familiar with and knew about?
I knew about them. I don't know that I knew the detail of exactly what was going on, but I was aware that these sort of things were in place.
And in terms of the work that you were doing, were Fujitsu systems picking up whenever things were going wrong or discrepancies were arising?
That was my understanding, and that was the purpose of this sort of monitoring, yes. And there were also reconciliation systems in place that were picking up, for example, failed banking transactions and things like that. And there were daily reports being produced that were being monitored and checked for. And there was a group that actually did that on a daily checks and things like that.
All right, so these are systems in place, yes?
Yes.
As opposed to sort of conversations with people about whether or not bugs might come to light. There's been a focus, Mr. Jenkins, on what your state of mind was during the time, particularly in Mrs. Misra's case, yes?
Yes.
And how you approach prosecutions. I want to ask you about the information that you provided to Professor Mclan, and if we can go to FUJ 00153-157. And if we could go to page 2 of that, please. And if we could just scroll up, please. Okay, sorry, if we could just go up. Sorry, keep scrolling down, I apologise. Yes, thank you. If you keep scrolling until we get to Jarnell. Thank you. So, Mr. Jenkins, this was an email that was sent by Miss Hogg on the 22nd of July 2010, yes?
Yes.
As a result of the meeting that took place between Charles Mclan and Gareth Jenkins, as directed by the judge, we now need to have, you see, access to the system in the Midlands, yes?
Yes.
Access to the operations at Chesterfield, yes?
Yes.
Access to system change requests, yes?
Yes.
Known error log,
Yep.
and the release documentation to understand what problems have had to be fixed, yes?
Yes.
So I think we can tell from that, can't we, Mr. Jenkins, that you were the person that provided Professor Mclan with that information, yes?
Yes, I believe so.
And if we scroll up and keep scrolling up, please. And if we just scroll down a bit, please. Thank you. Sorry, if we could go to the body of that email. Sorry, yes, thank you, if you keep it there. So this is Miss Thomas reflecting the views that, or reflecting why it is or how it came to pass that you provided that information, is
Yes,
that
I believe
right?
there's a separate email in which most of that text has been cut and pasted from
Yeah.
me to Penny Thomas.
And I'm just going to look at page 3, system change requests. Basically, he was asking to look at all system faults. I suggested that as we kept all testing and live faults in the same system, and there was around 200,000 of them, then that wasn't going to get him very far. Yes?
Yes.
So just to be clear about this, Mr. Jenkins, you told Professor Mclan not just about the known error log, but you told him that there were 200,000 faults on the system, yes?
In effect, though many of them were from the testing systems and so on, but that's really a reference to the peak system.
Yes. So you were quite clear with him, weren't you, that those were the sorts of numbers of fault in the
Yes.
testing and live system,
Yes.
yes? And do you understand then that the defence applied to get disclosure of those materials from Post Office?
That's what this email chain seems to be showing,
I
yes.
think it's right. It's not contentious that Post Office refused that, yes?
So I understood.
And I think you can see from your paragraph at the end that he's fishing. You don't personally support the requests, but they seem harmless, yes?
Yes.
So you didn't see any harm in he being able to obtain the information that was set out or the
No.
access that he wanted?
Yes, I didn't see any need to stop him actually looking at that sort of information, no.
And I think it's right that Fujitsu did start a scoping exercise in order to be able to explain or to be able to set out all of the changes that had been at the counter. Is that right?
Yes, we came up with a cost for actually doing that, but it would appear the Post Office had already, long before we'd actually done that costing exercise, Post Office had rejected the requests.
All right, but again, was there any problem with putting that information together and providing it if Post Office had wanted that to
Well, there's a
happen?
problem in terms of time and effort for doing it, but there wasn't a technical problem in actually providing that information. And in fact, Post Office should have had all that information themselves anyway, because all these change requests should have been signed off by Post Office at the time.
All right, thank you. Right, I'm going to turn then, if I may, to a different subject, Mr. Jenkins. And it's really
Robin, I understood from Mr. Beer that around about an hour was a reasonable estimate of your questioning. I think you probably had a generous hour. Can you give me some idea of what you have in mind?
Oh, sir, I'm almost finished. It's probably just
Right.
about 10 minutes more.
Okay, that's fine.
Mr. Jenkins, I wanted to ask you then about the evidence that you actually gave when it came to Mrs. Misra's trial.
Okay.
And I'm just going to pick up the transcript and ask if we go to that, please. And that's at poll 000 29406. All right, and if we could go and let's just orientate ourselves. We can see that this is the transcript, Mr. Jenkins, yes?
Yes.
Of the 14th of October.
Yes.
And if we just go, please, to page 8. We saw a little bit of this yesterday, but we didn't go the full way down this page. But if we just look at C, you were being asked, weren't you, can a computer system be perfect? Yes?
Yes.
And if we go, please, to page, I think this is the... Can a computer system be perfect? And you were saying, no, I don't think so, correct?
Correct.
And that's something that the transcript comes back to, Mr. Jenkins. I don't have time to go through all of it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pick out some bits, if I may. So if we look at page 58... and go to the letter D. We looked at these yesterday, Mr. Jenkins. And this is the bit where you set out that you were doing a high-level analysis, yes?
Yes.
Was this you being candid and open about the sort of investigation that you had carried out, yes?
Yes.
That you couldn't exclude, is that right?
Correct.
That there was a computer issue, correct?
Correct.
And I think that we see, if we go on, first of all, if we look at page 91, sorry, if we start at page 90 at letter G, you explained, didn't you, and you were questioned about the fact that you didn't know about the calendar square bug at the time, correct?
Correct.
And if we go over the page, you explained, didn't you, we can see that from letter A, that you wouldn't know about every call that's been raised, yes?
Correct.
And accepting that calendar square was the failing by the computer, yes, by the
Yes.
Horizon system.
Yeah.
And I won't go on with that, but you were questioned about that and about it not being the fault of a sub-postmaster, yes?
Yes.
And if we go to page 94, this is where we see you being questioned about the peak
Yes.
in Calendar Square, yes?
Yes.
And I think that goes on for some time, yes?
Yes.
And if we go to page 96, you were also asked questions about the known error log as well, yes? At
Yes, I
letter
am.
C. And at 106, this goes on for some time, this topic. From line F onwards. We can see the reference to the calendar square peak, can't we?
Yes, it
A
seems to
few
be.
of these errors seem to occur every week at different sites, so it's not just isolated, yes?
Sorry, not quite sure where we are
I'm
at the
so
moment.
sorry. Letter G,
Yes.
that's taken from the peak, isn't it? That's what you're
Yes.
being questioned about.
Yes.
And again, coming back to the idea it's been generated by the computer, yes?
Yes.
And if we look at page 123, again, I think we can see that you were asked questions. If we look at E and F,
Yes.
yes, that there could be problems that you weren't aware of, yes?
Yes.
If we go to 124, please. And if we look at letter E, and you say in your evidence, don't you, Mr. Jenkins, that you couldn't even say, just looking at the answer, I've no way of knowing whether any money loss was due to theft. I don't even know that money was lost.
Correct.
Yes? And indeed, I think at page 114, that you also agreed about defence questions, about mismanagement of the branch as well. So if we look at the very bottom of page 114, that there would appear to be mismanagement of the financial running of this post office. And you agreed and you said that's certainly what it looks like, yes?
Not quite got to which letter are we
I'm so
at?
sorry.
Sorry.
So bottom of page 114.
And
then
then
the
go
top
to
of
the
page.
page, shall we?
Top of page 115, please.
Yes. Yes.
So do you agree, Mr. Jenkins said a number of points, and I'm afraid I can't go through the whole of the transcript. It might be thought that you gave evidence that wasn't helpful to the prosecution case.
Indeed.
Can you see that? Thank you. If you wait just one moment. Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for being
Thank
able
you,
to ask
Mr.
questions.
Mr. Beer, is that it?
It is.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jenkins, for making a total of 5 witness statements, at least 2 of which can properly be described as extremely detailed. And thank you very much for giving oral evidence over 4 days. So we'll adjourn now until Tuesday, when we'll hear from Mr. Parker.
So yes,
9:45 as usual, Mr. Beer.
that's right, sir. I think there might be an amendment to that. It might be, we'll discuss this at the end of the day with you, I suspect, that only one day is required, and that day may be Wednesday. So the core participants and the public interested in the proceedings should keep an eye on their emails and the website respectively, just in case there is an update.
All right. Well, I look forward to further discussion with you about it.
Yes, we'll speak in a moment, sir.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you.